Hi, I'm your host Vasco Duarte. Welcome to the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, where we share tips and tricks from Scrum Masters around the world. Every day, we bring you inspiring answers to important questions that all Scrum Masters face day after day. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Team Tuesday this week with Linda van Sinten. Hi, Linda. Welcome back.
Thank you.
So, Linda, on Tuesdays, we talk about teams, but before we dive into that, share with us, what's the book that most influenced you in your career as a Scrum Master?
Dare to Lead by Brené Brown, which I like a lot. And also the podcast she has on Spotify, her own podcast of Dare to Lead. Also very good stories about what are your values and also that it's okay not to know, which is in line with our Monday version of not knowing what's best for the team and letting the team decide what's the next step. Yeah, be vulnerable, give space to others. Because if you say, I don't know, you invite other people to share their ideas. And then you become a richer person because you get more ideas and then better ideas from that, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point, right? Like, in order for the teams to take ownership of how they work, they need to be the ones sharing what that should look like. And if you give that space, if you allow them, if you invite them, as you said, to give their ideas, then both you and the team win.
Yeah, because there's a nice quote. I don't know the exact quote, but something I heard before. It was in the line of, if you always talk, you hear yourself speak and you hear only the things that you already know. But if you start to listen, that's where you get new knowledge and new ideas.
It's funny because just last week we had a guest here that was exactly sharing a similar story. Samet was talking about how he was always the one talking in the retrospective, and the team wasn't coming up with any ideas. And he was asking himself, okay, why is this happening? And of course, eventually realized that he had to shut up.
Yeah,
That's, by the way, a very simple way to invite others to share, right?
Yeah.
It's just shut up and let the silence sit.
Yes.
So now we turn our attention to the teams and how sometimes they become their own worst enemies. And we want you to pay special attention to how these big things very often start from small patterns or behaviors that start, scaling and perhaps ballooning out of proportion and creating problems for the team. So tell us that story. Tell us the story of a team. And what were those small things that gave you a hint that something was going wrong and how they developed over time, leading to problems later on?
It's mostly at the assignment I worked where teams were really finding themselves dependent on management and on group leads because there was a culture of group leads knowing the answer and teams by default thinking they didn't know or something. So when I entered there, I noticed that this culture was there and it was really self-destructing. There was one team that they had for improvements. It was a separate kind of team. So if they had, because it was a safe also environment, not safe like safety, but safe of the way of working. So they had inspect and adapt. The teams came up with improvements and those improvements were fed into the improvement team, which was already really strange. Because that team then was thinking about solutions and it was not the team itself that was thinking about the solutions. And then the solutions that were presented, often complaints came about that one. There was one of the engineers who later told me a story. She said, it's like when you go to a restaurant and then you say you're really hungry and they present you a dish and they give you noodles. And then you're like, yeah, okay, now I'm not hungry anymore, but I was not really in the mood for noodles. I really wanted pizza. But yeah, you gave me noodles. And indeed, it was a solution for my problem of being hungry. But I don't feel happy because this was not what I expected or what I wanted.
That's a very interesting setup. Do you have any insights as to why they might have gotten to that setup of having an external team focusing on improving other teams?
I have no clue why they came up with this. The only thing I can think of is that they felt that teams were too busy and had too much work to pay attention to improvements. That's what I think, that they felt the team couldn't spare the time to think about the improvements and make the improvements themselves. But over time, we managed to luckily change that and gave the teams more accountability. What's the good English word? They had to do more themselves. In the beginning, it was really hard. The team didn't even make their own user stories. They were made by someone else, and and they were also planned by someone else. And the team just had to do what they were told.
So is it so that that particular organization looked at teams as kind of just doers, like, just do as I tell you?
Yes. Yeah. It was also not a typical environment for Scrum. It's a hardware environment. And also, it was kind of clear what needed to be done. So there was a handbook, and if there was a new machine, you have to follow the handbook. And if you followed everything, then you're done. So it's not a typical Scrum environment, but the environment was really complex. So that's why Scrum can still be used. There were like 20 projects at the same time, and all people pulling at the team at the same time. And to get improvements in place, Scrum did help us. So the nice thing is that over time, we were able to encourage the teams, for example, to make their own user stories. And in the beginning, they were really struggling hard. They said, but what if we miss something? Who is accountable if we miss something? And what if we write down and do the wrong stuff? So they find it hard to get all the accountability and.
But that's one of the core aspects of Scrum, right? Like the reason why it's so good in complex environments is that the accountability is with the people that need to implement whatever needs to be implemented, right? Because then they have the fastest way of learning what works and what doesn't work. They have the fastest feedback and they can adapt, right? If you have like a layer of different people thinking about requirements and doing design and whatever, then of course the team gets the noodles at the end, as you were telling in that story. But they thought, maybe pizza would be a better solution, but we're not allowed to because we have to go with the noodle solution.
Yeah, what will happen if we start eating pizza? Will they get mad, and will we get some kind of a punishment or something, or stuff that we don't oversee yet that will come back to us later on? We don't know. It helps to call things then an experiment and say, okay, this is an experiment. It can go either right or it can go wrong. Either way, we'll learn something from it. So let's just try this. And we let them make their own stories, and it worked really well. Because they said, well, before they made, for example, 10 stories, but we always looked at the list and we said, well, they made these stories, but we don't really have to do this because we know we are the implementers. We never do this, so we don't have to do that. I don't know why they made that story. And now they were making it themselves, so they could just leave that one out. So it saved a whole lot of discussion for them to do it themselves. And also they felt ownership now. And now you also saw in retrospective that they came up with ideas and improvements like, hey, but now that we are planning and making all this ourselves, we notice that we can do it even better or smarter.
And they have the reason to do it because it's their life that gets better.
Exactly. So it was really, really a good change. And still, I noticed that the group leads still feel like they know and also still try to steer. I think it's hard for group leads or any leads that were used to steer a team, and then you go to Scrum and the team has to do it themselves. You see those group leads think like, but then what do I do? What's left for me? What do I do? And I noticed that that's currently what we're struggling with. They are still like, but I need to help this team and I need to provide them solutions because that's what I'm good at. That's why I am the position that I'm currently in. That's how I grew into this position. What do I do now? How can I be of value still? So that's a hard discussion too.
And it highlights one of the key aspects when we adopt Agile is that there's a layer of management that goes through that process of finding a new identity and a reason to be there.
Yeah, so I try to use the drama triangle. I don't know if you know that one. It has a bit to do with the noodles and the pizza. So in the triangle, you have someone that's the savior. So I see currently those leads a bit as saviors. They want to help the team, and they currently do that by pushing solutions upon them. But then automatically you get victims and prosecutors. So the victims are the ones that then say, okay, since you always have the solution, help me. I don't know what to do. And those are the ones that don't show any accountability or any self-organization. They just lay back and say, help me because you have the solutions. That's not what you want. And you have the prosecutors that say, hey, you gave me the noodles, but I wanted the pizza. And now I'm angry at you because I didn't want those noodles. And they start complaining. So you have the complainers. And those triangle, stays there. So the complainer, then the savior says, okay, oh, you're complaining. I have to have a solution here. And the victim starts to shout help. And then you have to start saving them as well. And I noticed that then people will be so busy trying to save and help people that in the end they overcommit and they cannot get it done. And then they start complaining like, oh, those teams should be self-steering, but they don't do it. What should we change in the teams? You shouldn't change the teams. You should change yourself. You shouldn't be the savior.
That's a great tool. I'll find a source online and put the link on the show notes for people to go and study the drama triangle.
Drama triangle. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that, Linda.
You're welcome.
Tuesday is Team Day here on the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast. But tomorrow we talk about something that goes beyond the work we do with the teams. We will talk about how to lead change and what our guests have learned from leading and participating in change programs during their career. See you tomorrow. We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.